It's been a heck of a month. But we're all still here. If we all successfully made the jump to hyperspace. Yeah, see, Tom muted his, and then I forgot to mute mine.
Yeah.
God damn it.
I actually was prepared this time.
Tom was the most prepared person here. Oh, boy. All right, I think we're good. All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome into another live Roadway Whiz presentation. I am your host, yours truly, and tonight we're going to resume our series of live shows for the winter of 2021 and 22 with a look at one of my favorite drives in the Pacific Northwest. This is a drive that I took in July of 2021. And we're going to explore the westernmost 140 miles of Interstate 90 in the state of Washington, from the Columbia River to downtown Seattle. We have a small panel tonight, but that's okay. Small panels are cool too. Making his debut for Season 3 tonight, out in California and joining us via Skype, is Challenger Tom of GribbleNation.org. Hi, Tom.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going. How's the weather in Fresno?
It's 68 today, low of 36 tonight, so it's kind of like almost desert-like.
Yeah. That's about typical weather this time of year, isn't it?
Usually the low is a little bit higher by now, but it hasn't been raining for like a month and a half, so it seems pretty dry.
Oh, it's dried out again?
Yeah.
That doesn't sound very good.
No, probably gonna bode for a nice fire season again.
Oh boy, yeah. All right, so that's enough good news out of you. Now the other panelist here came all the way from Maryland to be here tonight, and that's Laura. Hi.
Hey, Dan.
MDRoads.com fame.
Woo! Mrs. MD Rhodes checking in here live in the studio in Fishkill.
Yes.
Which is
at an undisclosed location, as Doug likes to say on the Gribble Nation Roadcast. Yeah.
But it's nice to be in the studio here with you, Dan. Excited to make the trip up this morning from Maryland, and Mike, Mr. MD Rhodes, and baby MD Rhodes, Rainey, they'll be in at some point too.
At some point, yeah. They're out clinching Dutchess County routes right now, probably. So it's the three of us for tonight's show. And we're happy to have you guys along for the ride too, and the live chat. So let's get started here. Tom, what do you want to say about GribbleNation.org updates and whatnot? How would you like to summarize what's going on the blog?
For me, I work mainly on just California stuff for this month. I'm going to pick up on what's left of the Oahu highways pretty soon. I kind of snuck my own Washington State blog in fairly recently with the North Cascades Highway. So I may or may not, if I get time to it, maybe do something for old US 10 in Idaho's Silver Valley this month.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the Oahu blog stuff, because that's something that you and I have embarked on doing for the blog, trying to profile all the state highways of Oahu, which, at least as far as I'm aware, no one has ever tried to do it before in the manner that we're doing it.
No, there is a Hawaii's Highways page, which fortunately they've been really cooperative and helpful, but I've never seen a video series, much less a blog series that features them all. The tricky part is actually figuring out what existed and when. It doesn't seem to be a straightforward answer sometimes.
Yeah, right. So I'm glad that we're starting to kind of assemble all the resources and all the information that we have so that we can construct a proper blog series that hopefully, when it's complete, will be all-inclusive and as damn well close to accurate as is possible. And I know that you've done a lot of really good research on your end also to try to put the pieces together.
Yeah, no, there's. I'm kind of looking forward to, like, I note them in every one of the blogs, but the World War II era Hawaii routes. I want to cap that all off by having kind of a quick directory of which one all of them were and what they correspond to in modern times.
Yeah. There's some really fascinating stuff to dive into with Oahu, especially, but. Maybe we'll revisit this topic if we get a few quiet miles of interstate on tonight's drive. As far as I'm concerned, continuing with uploads of the Carolinas on YouTube. So for the next month, you'll see a lot of Interstate 85 and 40 primarily in North Carolina. There would be some other stuff also. I just got done uploading some I-73 and 74 stuff. So that's on the channel, and again, that now you know what's coming up in the next month. So you have that to look forward to. If you had this as your Super Bowl matchup, audience, please raise your hands. And if you guys are intelligent, I should see absolutely 0 hands go up remotely. But yeah, this is what we've got. This is actually the first Super Bowl that does not feature a top 3 seed in either conference. Cincinnati and the Rams are both 4 seeds in their respective conferences. It's the first time ever. They started seeding in 1975, around the time that they expanded the playoff format, and we've never had a seed. We've never had no seed in the Super Bowl beyond that was at least in the top 3. So we'll do a more formal preview of the game next week for next week's show. But at least, by now we know of the matchup, and everybody's going to be placing their bets for the next week and all that good stuff. And actually, tomorrow morning, we will have a new podcast episode going live on the Gribble Nation Roadcast that kind of breaks down Cincinnati and Los Angeles from a roads perspective. So you can have that to listen to. Or you can have that to listen to on your way back home to Maryland.
That's right.
Yeah.
One comment I will say is that very fitting, the Bengals in the Year of the Tiger.
Is that right?
Yeah, this year's just had the Chinese Lunar New Year. 2022 is the Year of the Tiger.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
So the Detroit Tigers will win the World Series this year, Tom.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Vaguely remember them doing it in '84.
Yeah. Right, that was the last time they won, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I wanted to give you guys a quick synopsis of the road trip I just came back from in late January. Took place over parts of 17 days between January 14th and the 30th. It covered states of Alabama, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, and South Carolina. It filled in a lot of gaps in coverage, primarily the Atlanta metro area, and most of the major rural interstates radiating out from Atlanta to connect into other states where I already had coverage completed. One of my favorite experiences was being in Selma, Alabama on Martin Luther King Day, which was January 17th this year, I think it was. Visiting the Edmund Pettus Bridge was always a bucket list item for me, but I feel like it was a lot more special given the day that I actually got to visit it on. It's really an amazing spot if you ever get the chance to visit it. I know some people in the community have already, but that's one that I recommend you take the short detour off of I-65 to go visit out in Selma. It's right off of US Route 80. So it's very easy to get to. So that is one of the things I take from this trip. Another thing I take from this trip is fulfilling a goal of mine to add more aerial and drone footage coverage of some of my favorite bridges in the Southeast, such as this one here. This is the Sidney-Lanier Bridge in Brunswick, Georgia, on US Route 17, south of Savannah. This bridge in particular is one of my favorite of the cable stay variety. It's been with us for almost 20 years. It was a cutting-edge bridge when they built it, although it's kind of fallen to the ranks of the ordinary since then. But it's a really pretty bridge and a really picturesque spot, and the drone picture does not really do enough justice to just how beautiful this spot really is. As I said, it's one of my favorite bridges, and I was really happy to add it to the drone catalog. And speaking of drone pictures, I have one more for you, and this is right smack in Midtown Atlanta, where Interstate 75 and 85 come together. Atlanta was the flagship metro area for this road trip in late January. It's really the last major metro area for the channel that was not covered east of the Mississippi. So pretty much everything that I want to do in the months and years ahead is west of the Mississippi. So that's quite a significant milestone, and I'm glad that Atlanta was finally checked off the list. I know that it's a city I've had interest in visiting for quite some time, but things finally came together to make the trip happen this year, and I'm really glad that it did, and I think you guys will really like the footage that I brought back from Atlanta and the other places that I visited too. Alright, but that's not what you're here tonight to take part in. We're here to do an I-90 drive, aren't we? Here's the map. You see on the right-hand side of your screen the Columbia River. We're going to be starting the drive shortly, or just a few miles east of the Columbia River, and we'll proceed westbound through Ellensburg, through Snoqualmie Pass, through the Cascades, and we will end in the SoDo neighborhood of Seattle, right next to the stadiums and within an eye shot of downtown. It's about 142 miles altogether. And that's all I got for the PowerPoint part of tonight's show. Does anybody have any questions, any comments, any concerns before we start?
Not for me. Familiar territory.
Well, I hope you don't have any questions.
None for me. I'm looking forward.
And we're back next weekend, by the way. Kansas City will be our first webinar of this half of the season, so that'll be interesting. I wonder who I'll be able to drag on to be a panelist for next week. A Kansas City webinar. We got a real barn burner on our hands, folks. Absolutely nothing to talk about in Kansas City, right? All right. So we're going to start here, a few miles east of the Columbia River. This video file is 1 hour and 52 minutes in all, and it's about 142 miles to downtown Seattle from here. And your trip west on I-90 starts now. You don't mind me, I'm off-roading a little bit because I was changing the batteries in my camera so I could start the westbound trip. There's Seattle as a control city for 90 West at this point. We're getting on 90 West at this point. I would say the scouting report that I have of 90 between the Columbia River and Idaho is that it looks a lot like what you're seeing in this couple of miles or so, where once you're east of the Cascades, you're in a completely different climate zone. You're in practically a high desert for a lot of this drive. Isn't that about accurate?
Yeah, I think part of the Great Basin might even extend into Washington State, but I'm not 100% on that. It's very, very desert-like, especially when you get towards like Grand Coulee Dam. There's some pockets, I believe, in there that get like less than 10 inches of rain a year.
Yeah, and you notice how like the winter storms have been coming through the northwest. The area out this way has barely gotten a drop out of those storms. It just dries up once it hits the mountains. But why don't you, Laura, talk about some overview stuff with I-90 for a second?
Sure. So Interstate 90 is 298 miles long in the state of Washington. It was designated in 1991 as the American Veterans Memorial Highway. The I-90 was completed in 1993, and we'll go over later a bit why it's so late. I guess I'm trying to think how in depth I want to go.
You've got a lot of notes there. Holy cow!
A lot of notes.
Jeez.
So
she's coming for your job, Tom.
That's why I write things down so I don't have to remember them.
Yeah.
So the section between Seattle and Thorpe, which we'll see a bit later, is designated a National Scenic Byway, the Mountains to Sound Greenway. The busiest section in the state of Washington, and my Maryland accent is coming out there.
I thought I noticed that, yeah.
Washington.
Like, what did she just say?
So the busiest section in the state is in the Bellevue Eastgate neighborhood, where the average annual daily traffic, the AADT, is 150,000. And the quietest section in the state is near State Route 21 west of Ritzville, and that's 11,000. So pretty big difference across the state, but not surprising considering that it's 298 miles. Yeah.
So, Tom, what would you like to say about this stretch of 90? Or is Tom too busy writing down stuff still? I don't know. Did we lose him? I don't know. Where did he go? I don't know. Anyway, why don't you keep going? I don't know.
Sure. Well, I see we're coming up on a scenic view up here.
Yeah. So if you took this ramp and you parked your car and you walked out, you would get a really awesome view of the Columbia River and the Vantage Bridge looking southbound.
Yeah. I have a lot of info on the Vantage Bridge, but whenever...
Yeah, so we're about to cross so we'll come down the hill here, and we'll cross the Columbia River on the Vantage Bridge, which was built in the early 60s. I believe it was built for U.S. Route 10, back when that was still a thing out this way.
Yes. So, basically, the Vantage Bridge started as a ferry. The ferry was came about. My notes basically mention the ferry as being part of Sunset Highway, which was constructed in 1914. I don't know if that's when the ferry itself started or if it started earlier. But either way, that when Sunset Highway was constructed, they chose to route it over Wantage Ferry, and basically by 1923, they realized that a 4-car ferry was not enough. It was transporting 50,000 people across the river annually. So the original bridge on the site was built in 1927, again as part of Sunset Highway, later US 10. A second bridge had to be built on the site because the new reservoir, Wanapum Lake, formed by the new Wanapum Dam, was overwhelming the original bridge. So the new bridge was built and opened. Well, new and current bridge. Here it is. It opened in 1962, and interestingly, the 1927 bridge, the original steel cantilever truss, was reused for the Lions Ferry Bridge in 1968 in Starbuck, Washington, which is State Route 261 over the Snake River.
That's right, and that's an interesting bridge in its own right for us to talk about someday. Yeah. Whenever I do a Columbia Bridges webinar or whatever.
Indeed, and one other note is when the original bridge was being built, it was gonna the ferry was going to originally be replaced by a privately constructed toll bridge, but the state approved funding to build, its own bridge because they stood to lose $900,000 in federal funds for the North Central Highway if a toll bridge was built.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's the Vantage Bridge. It's one of my favorite bridges on the Columbia River. I think it has a lot to do with the picturesque backdrop that you saw there.
Gorgeous.
The Pacific Northwest is just loaded with these scenic views and whatnot. It's such an amazing place to just drive around. And these interstate drives aren't even the start of it. If you even get off the interstate system and drive the U.S. highway system, like U.S. Route 2, U.S. 97, 197, 395. I mean, all of these U.S. highways I've heard are just fantastic drives.
The Columbia River Highway.
Oh, hey, you're back.
Yeah, I was on mute and didn't realize what I was doing.
That's all right. You haven't been on one of these live shows in a while.
No, I'm a little bit rusty, suffice to say. I don't even use Skype for work anymore.
Oh, wow. So we got over the bridge, and now we're going up a pretty lengthy upgrade. It's not particularly steep. This is the grade that'll take us up to Ryegrass Summit, which has a height of about 2,500 feet above sea level. Interestingly, I-90 doesn't really get all that high above sea level, whether it's here or through Snoqualmie Pass. I think it's only about 3,500 at Snoqualmie, if I'm not mistaken. But compared to other interstate highway passes, like I-80 across the Sierra is over 7,000 feet. So this one is a bit more leveled out compared to some of the other drives that you could take.
Yeah, so Snoqualmie Pass is 3,022 feet.
Oh, it's even less than that. Okay.
Yeah.
Most of Cascade passes are... Sorry, Laura.
No, it's okay. No, just that's the lowest of Washington's 3 major Cascade passes.
Yeah, the Cascade range in general is fairly low elevation-wise, or at least lower than probably most people would expect. I believe the highest is Washington Pass on Washington 20.
Well, seeing all the windmills in the background is a good time to mention that near here is the Wild Horse Wind Farm, which has a visitor center, a renewable energy visitor center. And it's a 273 megawatt farm for Puget Sound Energy. And yeah, they can produce wind energy with winds as low as 9 miles an hour. And amusingly, the wind farm is on top of Whiskey Dick Mountain.
Oh, it goes in Kitchen Dick Road. That's another Washington State.
That's in Washington State too, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Actually,
not the same part of the state, but
no, that's out on the Olympic Peninsula. But yeah, that one actually, there's an explanation for it. Apparently, it's just a bunch of people. They amalgamized the names of people who lived on the road.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, another cool thing about this area is the Ginkgo Petrified Forest State Park, which is one of the largest collections of petrified trees in the world, and there's over 50 species petrified at the site. It was established in 1935 and is 7,124 acres.
You know, this stretch that we're going through right now reminds me a lot of Interstate 8 east of San Diego, where you have a mountain pass stretch there, and you also have windmills along the way, and that's another great drive. And of course, we've done an episode on that drive before, but there's just so many beautiful mountain interstate drives in the West, and 8 is probably... if it's not number one, it's number 2 on the list. I might put I-84 through the Columbia River Gorge at number 1, but certainly I-8 is really memorable, and even I-90 is really memorable too. So this just kind of reminds me of something you'd see in Southern California in the mountains down that way.
The feel I've always gotten for this area is just like I-84 in Idaho. You have like all these bluffs and rivers and everything kind of cutting through the terrain is very similar.
Yeah, that's true. Because again, like the Cascades is really the dividing line in climate zone. And so the stuff you see out this way will feel a lot like the stuff you see in eastern Washington, Idaho, even Nevada. You know, there's some similarities there too. And then west of the Cascades, it's all very similar once again, except it's like the opposite. It's like very, like the pine forests and, very very dreary weather, all days of the year. So it's hard to find the more contrasting style of two areas that are right next to each other.
Yeah, you got that constant drizzle west of the Cascades. The further north you go, it's absolutely miserable in the winter.
Yeah. Well, the only time it rained on this July trip that I was on was when I was driving from Seattle to Portland, and it was that really misty, drizzly rain that doesn't show up on the radar. It's more like fog. That's a daily occurrence out that way.
Yeah, it's like their version of our fog down here in California. This is basically it's so much more thick that it comes down as mist instead of fog.
Yeah. Well, we're approaching Ryegrass Summit here, which, as I mentioned, has an elevation of a little bit over 2,500 feet. I do want to tell you that there's one thing that when we reach the summit here, you should keep an eye out for. There is something that will appear on the horizon, like a giant white dome on the horizon, and I'll tell you what that is when we get there, but keep an eye out for that. It's a very significant landmark in Washington State. I don't know, what else you got for notes? You got anything else? You want to tell us?
I mean, it's funny because I have so many notes, but
Holy cow. My goodness.
Yeah, so I guess I've got overview, right? I've got, I have, and I have a lot focused on later with Seattle, Mercer Island. I just have some Spokane notes before I realized, oops, we're not going that far. We're not starting that far east. A ton about I-90 history. I wrote out the whole exit list as a personal reference to really get myself familiar. I've got some on the Snoqualmie Pass and a bit on the history that I was going to talk about there, but I could talk about it now.
Where is Hey Tom, we should try to get Laura on the Gribble Nation blog site. You should see the notes she has.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I think most of us just basically write down notes like that in blog format.
I mean, she's got the formula, dude. I'll tell you.
I
think Adam and Doug would be happy to have her too.
Yeah.
That would be really, really awesome. Because, I mean, if you discount the fact that I then, had an ADHD moment and then decided that I was going to learn how to sing the Death Cab for Cutie song 405. Because, I-90 interchanges with I-405. So, there's a page.
Well, we'll revisit that at some point later.
We will.
Do you see that big white peak on the horizon right now?
Yes.
That is Mount Rainier, about 100 miles to the west of here. Mount Rainier is the tallest peak in the state of Washington, with an elevation of 14,411 feet. It is the highest peak in the Cascade Range. It's one of the highest peaks in the contiguous United States. And it is classified by the United States Geological Survey as an active volcano. The primary threat from Rainier is something known as a lahar, which is when the ice on the top of the mountain mixes with the volcanic ash that gets spewed out, and it forms, I guess the easy way to describe it is a mudslide, except it's not really mud. It's something that has more of the consistency of wet concrete. And it storms down the mountain and into the river valleys below. Rainier has erupted occasionally at various intervals over the millennia, and there are ancient lahar deposits underneath a lot of communities in the SeaTac metro area east of Tacoma, south of Seattle, particularly in the Puyallup Valley. And there's even some really ancient lahars that go back centuries where you have deposits in Seattle Harbor. So in the past, this mountain has really been potent in producing those volcanic slides that essentially bury everything in their path. There is no real imminent threat for Mount Rainier. It's one of those things that'll just decide to awaken one day, and when it does, hopefully people can get to higher ground. That's really the important thing. The other thing I'd like to say about Mount Rainier is that between here and Ellensburg, over the next 15 miles or so, you will be able to see the top of the peak as it sticks out above the top of the Cascade Range. That is the only time in this video that you'll be able to see the mountain, because we'll be passing north of the mountain, and even in the mountain passes, the Cascade Range will obstruct the view of the mountain even at that point too.
It's a nice national park too. I've been several times. The Paradise Road, that's got some pretty nice bridges on them that are kind of really scenic.
Very picturesque area too, right?
Yeah, there's a couple notable highways that go up there. I've always really enjoyed it. I think I've been up there like 4 times over the years.
I really like this railroad trestle that we're coming up on and passing underneath. I believe it's been converted for use as a rail trail.
Ah, yes, I have some information on said trail.
Okay, well, I'm glad you spoke up.
Woo! So, the Palouse to Cascades State Park Trail is a rail trail that spans most of Washington State. It's about 300 miles long. It is formerly the Chicago, Milwaukee, St. Paul, and Pacific Railroad. And I have a note here that at least near South Clay Alum, I don't know if I'm saying that right. Is that how you say
Let me see
that city? Clay Alum? Cleelum.
That'd be a question for Tom. How do you spell Cleelum? What's the
name? I always wing it. I'm never sure myself.
Yeah, okay.
Well, anyway, so that city, which is like milepost.
Tell us how you really feel.
Right. Which we'll see at milepost 85 and 84. But yeah, I had a note here because in South Clay Alum, which I'm sure I'm gonna get.
That's probably what I would have said anyway.
Yeah. But anyway, pretty much right off of I-90, you can access the trail there, and it's also part of Iron Horse State Park.
So that's a pretty lengthy trail then.
Yeah, it goes across the whole state.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
It's really cool. It's funny, I think part of why I have so many notes is, well, A, I love taking notes, and B, that I've actually never been on this road. I've never been to Washington State. My interest in these webinars this virtual tour and then later the Seattle webinar actually comes from like a place of nostalgia for me, in that it was the one big trip that my grandparents went on. Like, my grandparents were farmers. They rarely went and when they did go on vacation, they would go to like the ocean or a cabin in the mountains. But like Seattle was like the one place that they ever went on like a big vacation. So when Dan said that, put these on the schedule, it just got me feeling nostalgic for my grandparents. And I was like, I'm going to learn everything there is to learn. And I still feel like I didn't learn enough, that there's so much more. And
you still have a few weeks before the Seattle webinar, so don't worry.
I do.
Yep.
But yeah, no. I mean, I think it's awesome that y'all think that, I might be a good fit for Gribble Nation.
I mean, you take notes like a good blogger, I have to say.
Well, thank you.
That is a solid blog post right there.
Yeah.
I wish Tom could see what I'm talking about, but you'd be impressed too, Tom.
I can hear it. It's massive.
as we approach, we're about 5 miles out from Ellensburg. The very top of Mount Rainier is now disappearing behind the front range of the Cascades. That's the last time that we'll see the peak. Interesting that the only time that you see a mountain that big on a drive this long is when you're 100 miles away from it. But that's the deal. The West has a lot of prominent mountain peaks. This is one of them. If you're catching it right and the weather is good, Mount Hood is visible on I-84 for about the same amount of distance coming from the east. Another one that comes to mind for me is in Arizona, Humphreys Peak, which stands above Flagstaff. If you're coming from the north on, say, US 89 or US 1... Is it 160?
160.
160, yeah. I always confuse 160 and 180. You can see Humphreys Peak from about 100 miles away, too. It comes into view north of Tuba City. So, yeah, the West has a lot of really interesting mountain, prominent mountains surrounded by really lunar-like landscapes. And
yeah, Shasta. Mount Shasta.
Is that another one?
Oh, that's probably the most easily seen of them all. You can see that from I-5 in Northern California and US 97. And the best view is from California 89.
Yeah, that's one I have not seen yet, Shasta. But yeah, I would like to complete my coverage of I-5 from Sacramento up to the Canadian border at some point. So that's one I'm going to have to go check out.
Cutting out the West Side Freeway?
What's that?
Cutting out the West Side Freeway from Wheeler Ridge to Sacramento? Or have you already done it?
Well, I already covered Sacramento.
No, I mean I-5 from Wheeler Ridge, south of Bakersfield, to Sacramento.
Oh, well, I have to do that too, but yeah. Since we're on the subject of Shasta and Southern Oregon and all that stuff, that's another gap. I think I have 3 gaps in I-5 left. I have from Newhall Pass to Modesto.
Yeah.
And then from north of Sacramento to like Oregon City or just south of Portland. And then from from Everett up to Bellingham and the border. That's the third one.
Yeah, that I'd be interested to see what your opinion is on I-5 from the split with 99 to Sacramento, because I've often heard, and I tend to agree, that it's a contender for most boring interstate segment on the West Coast.
Okay. Well, I'm sure I'll cover it at some point. I'll stop to give your Challenger a test drive on the way.
Yeah, you probably could easily cruise at 120, no problem on that, that's for sure.
Yeah. Tom, what do you want to say about this area of Washington? I know we're north of Yakima. We're approaching the junction with I-82, and we're approaching the city of Ellensburg. Which is a significant crossroads town where I-90 and I-82 meet, and then US 97 comes in here also. 82, by the way, just a quick aside here, that it's a major truck traffic route for traffic coming to and from Seattle from the Mountain West states like Utah, Colorado. It's the most direct way to get you there, rather than continuing east on 90 all the way to Montana. So 82 is... I was surprised at just how much commercial traffic was on 82 when I drove it. But yeah, it's basically the main road to get you from Seattle to Salt Lake by way of, and then you connect with 84 near Pendleton and take that all the way, the rest of the way.
Yeah.
But
yeah, like this whole area, like you said, is mainly just a big junction point for all these major interstates and highway corridors. last time I was out in this area, I actually went to the Hanford site, which is quite a bit ways east of Ellensburg. But that's what I remember is just like everything's just kind of funneling into I-90 in the area that we're reviewing right now. So this is just the big trucking corridor.
Yeah, and then the amount of trucks really picks up from here as we're 109 miles from downtown Seattle. So this is, from here on in, this is one of the more significant and more important truck interstate corridors in the West, I would say. As the main east-west highway serving all vehicles into and out of Seattle. I wanted to say something about Ellensburg, but I'm forgetting what's the deal here. Hang on. Ellensburg is the county seat of how the hell do you say that county name? Kittitas? Maybe? Kittitas County? I'm going to go with that. It's in the foothills of the Cascade Range. The population is about 21,000. And it became a pretty significant railroad town in the 1870s along the Northern Pacific Railroad. And now it's a major crossroads on the interstate highway system. Is somebody at the door? we're trying to figure out what's going on here. Yeah, that door is a pain in the ass. Oh, hello. We have other panelists here. Hi. There we go. The party can officially start because these two are here.
Rainy, you want to say hi?
Yeah. Hi, sweetie. That's right. We have Mr. MD Rhodes, Mike, is here, and the first daughter of MD Rhodes, Lorraine, who we all call Rainy, is also here. And Rainy is very impressed with your notes too.
Well, thank you. And my
I think she wants to. Yeah.
She wants to add to them as well.
I think so too. Tom is getting some free entertainment because he's getting to listen to all this stuff on the other end.
Yeah, I was thinking my dogs are gonna be to just kind of make some noise in the background today. They haven't so far.
Won't be launched. We'll be drawing clear reliefs and interchanges.
Oh, I believe it. She's not far away from that.
Oh, there goes the.
She had her sidewalk chalk. I took it and just started drawing.
Yeah, that's right. It's
drawing
paper.
interchanges.
There you go.
We're not going to draw on the history of.
Yeah, start a new page.
Start a new page.
Is that a composition book there with the old? I guess it's
with a Brooklyn brownstone on the front.
Oh, okay.
You know, that's how I roll.
Okay.
You know,
There you go.
city planner here.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, you haven't missed a whole lot, Mike. We missed the Columbia River, but that's about it.
I did listen earlier in, and
How many Dutchess County routes did you clinch with her?
we got a piece of 93 where we made a U-turn and got some gas.
Oh, all right.
The Snoqualmie
All right.
up the road there. So we got a little bit of US 9 further north.
Okay.
So we got all of it through Fishkill and then whatever the next town is there.
Wappingers Falls.
Yep.
There you go.
All right.
All right. Tom, anything you'd like to add about I-90 in general? I know that we're still about 50 miles from Snoqualmie Pass at this point, but
It gets interesting when you get into Seattle. Well, really when you get in the mountains. There's a lot of realignments of US 10 that went into how I-90 developed today. From what I recall, Terminus has some pretty odd history to it too. It was never finished to 99, which would have been US 99 at the time. So you kind of get into some weird. It just kind of suddenly ends. I think it's Safeco Field, or do they call it something different now? It kind of ends like right there at the ballpark.
Yes, what are the fields called? T-Mobile
T-Mobile
Park and Lumen Field.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So I think I-90 used to end at 5, and then it got extended about a half a mile west to the ballpark area.
Yeah, it was, I believe, I know I wrote about this years ago. I was supposed to make it out to 99 because you had the viaduct out there. So it was more of a freeway type situation with 99 as opposed to a toll road now. So it's kind of like one of those incomplete freeways in Seattle. There's just so many of them in general.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. Yeah, I had forgotten about the 90 extension out to the Alaskan Way, but yeah, that's another one.
Yeah, but prior to 2003, I-90 ended at a signalized intersection, and then the State Route 519 South Seattle Intermodal Access Project happened, which basically was when they constructed a new on-ramp and interchange to, loop it in, to State Route 519.
I see.
Yeah, that was fun trying to find that when they were building the tunnel and kind of tearing apart the viaduct.
Yeah, that was... I mean, we'll talk about that more on the Seattle webinar, but yeah, that was quite the interesting project, trying to stage the construction of the tunnel while keeping as much stuff downtown open as possible. Pretty much it was like Seattle's Big Dig, more or less.
Yeah, it went on for several years. Like around Pioneer Square, just trying to get around sometimes. Like I got stuck in this loop one time down there where I had to go around in a circle like 3 times to break out of it.
Jeez. Is she having fun with my book collection over there?
She is. She's starting her engineering career as we speak.
I'll let her borrow the book on the Quebec Bridge over there that I've got. That's a good one.
But I guess now is as good a time as any to talk a little bit about some of the early history. Even though, I had planned on waiting till we got to Snoqualmie Pass. Just because that's the earliest section of this road. Like, Snoqualmie Pass was used by the indigenous inhabitants of the Puget Sound and the Columbia Plateau in the summertime. And then it started to be used by fur traders and white settlers in the 1850s. And was the only route that could handle wagons and livestock. But it was chosen over the Natchez Pass for a major cross-mountain road. And was completed in October 1867 by Seattle businessmen. It was planned, so the original road was planned to be extended west to Black River and east to Yakima Valley. But, funding was not there. So it was sold to the Seattle and Walla Walla Trail and Wagon Road Company in 1883 and converted to a toll road. That toll road was unsuccessful. It couldn't compete with the Northern Pacific Railway, and so it was abandoned in 1893, transferred to county maintenance, contracted for improvements in 1899. The first automobile crossed in 1905, and the state designated it as State Route 7. And then in 1907 is when you started to have construction of more of what would become the I-90 corridor. You had construction between North Bend and Easton.
If you want.
And then it was announced that the road would go west to Seattle and east to Spokane and Idaho. And then in 1909 it was approved by the state legislature and commemorated with a 23-day race from New York City to Seattle. Can you imagine that? In 1909 it took 23 days to race across the country.
I think it would take Tom about 23 hours in his Challenger, right?
Yeah, especially in I-90. I get boring out in the plains.
Mm-hmm.
25 hours New York to L.A.
But yeah, then you have the Sunset Highway and the national routes. Basically, so the Sunset Highway came about. The funding was approved in 1913, and then construction was started in 1914. The crossing of the pass was lowered by 117 feet under the old wagon road, and then that was when they chose to route it over the ferry, the Vantage Ferry. And then it opened in October 1st, 1914, closed for the winter, and then reopened June 20th, 1915. The route became became US 10 from 1926 to 1957, and then after that, later the I-90. Oh, now Rainey has a pencil, and Rainey wants to, So now at least I can erase her notes over top of mine.
Yeah, well.
What I've always found interesting about Washington State is how old their state highway system really is. You mentioned State Route 7. It goes back quite a ways, like even to the early 1890s. Like they actually had like state highway designations over most of the major road corridors that they wanted to build over what were stage routes.
That's awesome. That's really early.
Yeah, no, there was I think Washington State Route 1. They wanted to build. It was the Cascade wagon road. They kind of built it. It was never really got finished how they wanted, but that was like the first one they built by like 1897. That's like prehistoric compared to most state highway systems.
Yeah, most states they were getting to weren't even getting to the named trail system yet. Before it even had dreamed of numbers.
No, that's like even before auto trails. Like that's just really surprised me.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got like different colored patterns painted on telephone poles, and they were already thinking of that. Now I don't know if any of that was actually posted yet, but it shows some forethought. Most of them were. It was only later, near the time of the U.S. highway system implementation in 1926, that either in the years surrounding that, either direction, that those states decided the number of their highways. It's a good other prior example was the New England highway system.
Yeah,
Again,
that's
predated
right.
That. It still has a footprint in the numbers you see today.
Yeah, some of them are. Yep.
Yeah.
We're coming up on a nice scenic view here, but we're still a bit of a distance out from the Cascades itself. I know I said that we could revisit something if we had a quiet few minutes on the interstate, Tom, but I forget what that was. It had something to do with the blog or the podcast?
Oahu.
Okay. Do you want to pick up that discussion or save it for some other time?
We can talk about it now. So what's kind of interesting about Oahu, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, is that there's really not like a full video series or a full blog series about what they have in Oahu as far as the road network. So that's kind of what we're working on right now. Like Dan took videos of pretty much everything that I didn't have picture-wise, so we're kind of combining the two of them into something that's going to be cohesive for the whole island. So like we even got into things like Interstate H4, which was never constructed. So it's pretty cool endeavor, I think. And I think things like hitting on some of the 1955 routes that no longer are around is going to be neat, because I don't think there's a lot of documentation for those. And, the World War II stuff. And you just flip through like Wikipedia, there's not a lot of coherent entries, really, not even just on Oahu, but like the entire state highway system in Hawaii. And I always thought that was interesting, because it seems like everyone's so interested in the, Interstate H1, H2, and H3 that it would have been documented better or more.
Yeah, this was such an exciting opportunity for us to do. And, when I joined the Gribble Nation team over a year ago, Hi. Yeah, I was really hoping that in some way I could integrate the Hawaii coverage that I have from 2019 into the blog somehow. And then, Tom, you had your own trip that you took out there, and you kind of got some ideas for some blog stuff that we could do. And then I think the whole thing really snowballed pretty quickly there. We kind of got the idea, well, why don't we just combine what we have and make a super blog series about the whole damn island?
Yeah, you even got an actual individual page going for it, too.
Yeah, we're serious when we've got an entire page on the blog just devoted to a summary of the island. That's a big deal. We're right up there with your US 99 stuff and Doug's covered bridges and Adam's North Carolina stuff. I mean, there's a ton of stuff now.
Yeah, I was looking at the California page the other day. I got to go in and clean up how that looks. That's kind of a mess.
Yeah.
That was kind of like the prototype modern one. Adam had done a lot before, but there hadn't been any new ones for several years.
Right, yeah. See, this is all stuff that I'm still kind of starting to learn, because I'm still technically the newbie with the blog, but yeah, we have a kid on the loose here. I tell you, she is that nap must have done her a lot of good. She is wide awake now.
I'm full of energy.
But Tom, you've covered all the major highways up this way. I know you're a California guy, and you're from Michigan. So, Washington, I don't think is a place that you've lived, right?
No, but I've worked there several times, so I get sent out there a lot on work assignments, which doesn't really give me a big opportunity to branch out too much. But like around Seattle and Tacoma, I've seen pretty much everything that's out there.
So what? I know that we're covering I-90 tonight, but like, as far as the Cascades are concerned, like, how would you rate some of the other mountain drives in this general area? I know that Stevens Pass is a road that a lot of people talk about. That's US Route 2 north of here.
Yes.
That's probably the one that people talk about the most as far as other U.S. highways are concerned.
I would put Washington 20 way above Stevens Pass. It is just like the route's just made to be scenic. It goes through the North Cascades Highway and North Cascades National Park, and actually it was finished in 1972. That's my opinion, is that's the most scenic of the three major Trans-Cascade routes in Washington State.
Yeah,
you get a real big overlook of Diablo Lake. You come down Washington Pass, and it's just surprising to me that a highway like that got finished so late in the game, considering that got all stalled up for like 70 years. Like, it was proposed for a very, very long time.
Okay. I hear some feedback time.
Oh, better now?
Maybe a little bit. It's a little better.
Okay.
I still hear myself, but well, yeah, I think it's gone now. But yeah, like there's just so much to tackle in the western states. I'm realizing, just the fun only really starts when you get off the interstate system.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that you can find in Washington State. And the interesting thing, it's kind of easy to find your way around, just given how they renumbered all the state highways out in Washington State. They used to have this really bizarre convention where there'd be like a primary state highway, and you'd have like all these secondary branches where like it would carry the same route number, but it'd be like 1A or 1C. Now the way they do it, it makes a lot more sense. So like, for example, like Washington State Route 3 has a lot of 300 route number branches, like in the Kitsap Peninsula. So you know you're connecting somewhere to Washington State Route 3 by proxy, if you know what you're looking for in the numbering convention.
Yeah.
But regarding the I-90 corridor, I found a 1924 Rand McNally map, and it's showing 3 auto trails signed over the pass to Seattle: the Yellowstone Trail, the National Parks to Parks Highway, and the National Parks Highway.
Well, we're about to enter the Cascade Range, I would say. And we are... Well, we're not quite halfway through this video. We got it still a little over an hour to go. We are about an hour into this live stream, so I'd like to do a quick reset while we have a moment here. You are watching I-90 westbound from the Columbia River to Seattle in this latest episode of the virtual tour series. And we have a toddler who is enjoying a little drink right now.
Indeed. You know what is really cool about this little toddler? We're in Washington State, and there's a Mount Rainier, and if you remove the R, that makes Rainy.
That's right. It's another highway that she can clinch virtually on TV.
Yeah.
That's right.
There's actually a rainy pass in Washington 20.
Is there really?
It really is, yeah.
Oh, wow.
There you go.
Well, I think you're going to have to get on a plane and go out there and see it.
Yes.
Tom, we have a lot of examples in the Northwest, especially in Washington State, of these old truss bridges, like the one right here on the interstate system. I know there are quite a few of these on I-5. Are these leftovers from the original U.S. highway system that once occupied the interstates here?
In many, many cases, yes, and I believe that is the case here. Like one that comes to mind on I-5, off the top of my head, would be around Manteca, when you kind of get that split between California 120 and I-5. It incorporates a truss bridge that was part of US 50, and I think it's actually a Bascule span that hasn't been in operation for like 40 years. So you get quite a bit of it, and you'll kind of see that when you get to Lake Washington, too. It's one of the bridges, I think it was the Hadley Bridge, was inherited from US 10 when it was realigned over the lake.
Yes, it was originally just the one bridge over the lake, and then they added the second bridge later, once the interstate was going to go through, yeah.
That's a strange alignment looking back in the past, but it made sense given, like before, we could kind of get modern highway development. Yeah, I mean, US 10 would have to go around Lake Washington. And I believe it's Washington 900 is the original alignment of US 10.
Yeah. Right, because US 10 used to go all the way out this way, and now it goes only as far as, Minnesota? I think that's as far west as it goes. They hacked off everything west of there over the years.
Even in Michigan, it's neutered. I remember when seeing US 10 signs on the Lodge Freeway, but that hasn't been in a long time.
Oh, right. Yeah. So a little bit of introductory information to Snoqualmie Pass. It is the lowest of Washington State's 3 major Cascades road highway passes. The summit is at 3,022 feet. It handles about 28,000 vehicles a day per weekday. It is one of the busiest mountain pass highways in the United States. Snoqualmie is also known as a prominent ski destination for folks, no doubt, in the Seattle metro area. The Snoqualmie Ski Resort is nearby. There's the Wenatchee National Forest in the area. There's also Kechelis Lake. Kechelis. I'm going to go with that.
Sure.
So there's a lot of recreational opportunities in that area of the state also, right in the midst of the Cascades.
It intersects with the Pacific Crest Trail, which runs, from California through California, Oregon, and Washington, from Campo, California to Manning Park, just outside Manning Park, British Columbia. Pacific Crest Trail is one of like the 3 big, recreational trails in the United States, and I guess the Triple Crown, so to speak, including the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail. As you already said.
Can I take eggs?
Sure, honey, you can have some of my sandwich.
I heard please. That's good.
Yes.
You're teaching her well.
I am. Oh, you want the bread. That's what you want. Okay.
Okay.
Here.
Bread.
I do want to point out that at the south end of Kechelis Lake is the highway passes under the state's first wildlife bridge. First one that was constructed in the state of Washington. It's 66 feet long
and we will see that wildlife bridge coming up here in a little bit. It was completed in 2018, I believe.
Awesome. Did you read that part? The average snowfall?
I was just about to talk about the snowfall.
Go for it. Here we go.
This is one of the snow belt areas of the western U.S. When those storms in the winter roll into Seattle and Washington State, they tend to dump snow measured in yards in this area of the Cascades, and Snoqualmie Pass is no exception. The average snowfall in this area is well in excess of 200 inches per year, and a lot of it just comes down at once in these huge mountain winter storms that oftentimes will render the pass impassable for periods of time. There are no doubt restrictions for traveling vehicles during winter storms, such as chains being required, 4-wheel drive, all that good stuff. It doesn't sound like a pleasant place that you want to be in the middle of a huge snowstorm.
Oh, it's never fun installing chains in any of these western freeways or even highways.
How often do you deal with that?
Me personally, not very often, because I wouldn't get an all-wheel drive car. So I forget how Washington State does it, but like in California, they have 3 levels: R1, R2, R3 chain controls. And with R1, if you have a 2-wheel drive vehicle, you are required to carry chains on you. And have them on at R2, but with all-wheel drive, you just need to carry them, and they rarely ever get to R3 unless, there's just like an apocalyptic level of snow and they need to get people across like I-80 in the Sierra Nevada mountains. But it's just a lot of unfun sitting on the side of a freeway trying to put chains on.
Yeah, that was the thing that I remember the most about driving I-80 from Sacramento to Reno in the middle of February, was just seeing the amount of snow.
Yeah.
You basically were driving through a tunnel without a roof. The snow was like, it must have been 15 feet high on either side of the highway.
I've seen it as high as 20 before.
Yeah, that is impressive. Just impressive how much it can snow up in these mountains in such a short amount of time. Reminds me a little bit of the lake effect snow that I know you're familiar with a little bit from being from Michigan. But the snow belt areas of New York State, like south of Buffalo and north of Syracuse especially, you see snow pile up in those areas, very easily too. It reminds me of some of the scenes from those areas.
Yeah, usually it happens in like this whole, I think that the term that everyone uses now is atmospheric river, but like the divide on the west coast is going to be the Cascades, the Sierra Nevada mountains, where basically it just all accumulates and stops. So like you get even like a trace amount of precipitation, like you can expect just absolute misery on the likes of I-80, I-90, just trying to get across one of these mountain ranges.
Yeah. And it really, and we're passing an area right now that I believe is a chain-up area. And you see how they've installed the overhead lighting to permit at least some semblance of safety for people doing this at all hours of the day. But yeah, it's completely foreign to somebody like me who has grown up and lived on the East Coast his whole life and doesn't really deal with mountains all that much. I mean, the mountains that we have that we call mountains are more like hills out west.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, and I think probably one of the worst aspects is a lot of the chain up zones will make you put the chains on before you even hit the snowy area. And we'll go for quite a ways once you're out of it too, and usually the speed limit's like anywhere from 25 to 35 miles per hour depending on the state.
So yeah, so that's and there are a lot of different chain up areas at different elevations, right? To compensate for wherever the snow level is.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, I can see how that can be a little aggravating. Let's see. What do you want to say about Snoqualmie Pass, Tom?
It's very pretty. It's very pretty. I don't have all those historic facts just sitting around me, unfortunately. But I would probably. It's very high up there, honestly, as far as scenic interstate corridors. At least my opinion. This is kind of the nice thing about like the West Coast. You get a lot of these mountain passes where you're going to kind of get a similar look to what you're getting right now, and you really just don't get this a lot in the interstate system until you kind of get like into New England, elsewhere in the country.
Yeah, like, you know, people talk about Franconia Notch in New Hampshire. I think that's the one that people tend to gravitate towards in New England as far as the interstate system is concerned. Mm-hmm. But you're right. Like, in the eastern states, there aren't many drives that have, like, the mountain feel to them like this. You know, that might be the only legit one. Like, I-40 across the Great Smokies is nice, but it mainly runs through the valleys in between the mountains.
Yeah, probably I-26 more so.
Yeah, 26 definitely has more of a mountainy feel to it, I would think. Yeah, because there are grades on that. There are a couple of mountain passes on that up north of Asheville.
Yeah.
And there's also one south of Asheville, too, near the South Carolina border. But
yeah, it gets hectic in there when it snows. I've been through there a bunch of times when it's been snowing. It's kind of very much resembles what you see even if like I-90.
Right, yeah. So yeah, those are probably the closest examples that we have on the interstate system anyway, out, you know, east of the Mississippi. Like, all the real action is west of it, out this way. So this is a really unique part of the interstate system that definitely doesn't, there's nothing else that really rivals it anywhere else in the country.
No, not even Colorado. Like, I think that's something that probably surprises people a lot about Colorado is just how much less snow it gets than these western mountain ranges in the Rockies.
Yeah. Well, they get snow up there, but it's not
like this.
It's not like Pineapple Express snow.
No.
Right.
That's why those roads could stay open at such a high elevation too, like I-70, US 6. Like, you're talking like ridiculous elevations that wouldn't even be close to possible out west.
Right. Yeah, I think I-70 gets over 8,000 feet, doesn't it? Something like that.
I can't remember where the elevation of the tunnel is. I think it's closer to 10.
It might be about 10. Yeah.
I know Loveland Pass is right around 12,000. That's US 6.
Yeah.
That's the truck route too.
Yeah, right. That's true. Yeah, Colorado is one of those states I still haven't been to. So that I'm gonna have to rectify that at some point.
Yeah, I didn't realize that. How many states
Okay.
have you been to, Dan?
Colorado is one of the 8 that I still haven't been to. So
The Eisenhower Tunnel elevation is 11,158.
11,000. There you
Yeah.
go.
That's the highest point on the interstate system.
Yeah, highest point on the interstate system, and
It's a tunnel.
at the Western Continental Divide, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's at the west portal. It's a few feet higher at the west portal than the east portal. But,
Yeah.
Continental Divide goes under that too. So that's,
Yeah, that whole stretch out of Denver from, out to Grand Junction or whatever, through the tunnel and then through Glenwood Canyon, through that stretch. I mean, that's a bucket list drive for me. So, looking forward to covering that for the channel at some point.
Yeah, even if you continue on 70 through the swell out in Utah, that's top notch also.
Yeah, Doug drove that not long ago, I think.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, I know he holds that in very high regard, that stretch.
thinking of the old, all the switchbacks on the old US 6 that used to go through there. Just the amount of time that saves and around Silverthorne, Keystone, and that part of Colorado. And to get to the ski resorts like Breckenridge and Aspen and that whole area. And
It's strange how US 6 just kind of dips in and out of existence out there.
yeah.
It's not signed really anywhere on I-70, but it will you jump off I-70 and boom, there's US 6.
Yeah, Colorado is not known for signing the concurrencies. Sometimes you will get a small shield out of them on an interstate. You'll get a tiny shield next to the big interstate shield, but I think that's what you'll usually end up with.
What are we listening to in the background there?
She has this little steering wheel that plays classical music. A little baby Einstein steering wheel.
It does
you
have-
learn your colors, your red, yellow, and green for, a traffic light. You learn it in 3 languages.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, we're approaching. It looks like the wildlife over Wildlife Bridge here.
Yeah, this is the Wildlife Bridge that we talked about a few minutes ago. I believe it was completed in 2018. It was the first bridge of its type in the state of Washington. And now there are many of these bridges starting to pop up in mountainous areas across the West. There's no word on if the deer have to pay a toll to cross it.
2018.
Maybe they have, whatever that, I forget what they call the toll tag in Washington State. Maybe they have one of those.
Right.
Well, you just have those little.
They have a microchip.
The little ear tags that they have on them.
That's true. They probably tag a lot of them. Yeah.
Where it's there's a lot of the wildlife tracking where they have those tags or small transmitters and go around flying an aircraft tracking migrations.
Yeah.
When did the anybody know when the variable speed limit sign went in?
I mean, they look pretty new.
Yeah, I don't remember those.
They may have been put in as part of this project. Because this whole stretch that we're on was reconstructed as part of that whole Wildlife Bridge addition. And that was completed in 2018. So this all might be within the last 3 to 4 years. Yeah, you see how they definitely widened the freeway to provide additional chain-up areas on the right. So that explains the overhead lighting that we're passing underneath right here. This freeway section definitely has a much more modern look to it. And I highly doubt it always looked like this.
No, it was way more narrow from what I'm remembering.
Yeah.
Okay. So I saw on the mile sign about 6 miles to Snoqualmie Pass, but we'll be closer to that now. And then there'll be kind of a frontage road here. Maybe the old road is Washington Route 906.
Yeah,
It'll be through the resort areas.
This video was filmed in early July, and in spite of the intense heat wave that came through Seattle the week before this trip, you could still see a little bit of snow on the peaks of some of the Cascade mountains here. If you did this drive in, say, September, you wouldn't see any snow whatsoever, but there was still a little bit of snow hanging on in some of these peaks, as you can see.
It's pretty incredible. Again, as being somebody who's lived on the East Coast my whole life, to see snow on peaks in July is mind-blowing.
Right. You don't even get that in the Adirondacks or any of the mountains up in the eastern states. It's all long gone by summer.
Yeah.
You rarely have to deal with, you have to deal with the grades on highways. You don't have to deal anything with altitude effects like.
Well, yeah, we don't have to deal with that either.
Yeah. Different grades of gasoline when you go west too. That was a first for me hitting Nebraska. It's like the octane numbers change because you're getting into some altitude above 3,000, 4,000 feet.
Right.
Those are so unreliable. I've always found, like the 85 octane, I can always end up with engine knock if I fill up with that.
Really? Yeah.
Well,
You know, I just realized that the drive that we're on today is at a lower elevation than I reached a couple weeks ago. I-26 at the North Carolina-Tennessee border is about 3,600 feet. And we're not going to go much past 3,000 on this drive.
Oh.
thank you. You want it? You sure?
But you know, this whole stretch that we're on right now, for the next 20 miles or so, to me it reminds me so much of a Bob Ross painting. And you can see why so many of his mountain landscape paintings look the way that they do. Because he was stationed up in Alaska for so many years, and he fell in love with the Pacific Northwest region as a whole. And so many of his ideas for paintings are based on landscapes like this, you know, with the mountains and the snow in the background and the pine forest, the evergreen trees, and all that stuff. No doubt that he passed through this area more than once in the past, and I'm sure that's where he got some of his ideas.
It doesn't open, honey.
Interesting aside about the snow, Dan. There's actually a lot of glaciers in this area, and there's one. It's kind of like northwest of where we're at right now. It's for something. It's like really low elevation now. There's like this glacier that's at like 2,000 feet above sea level.
Okay.
Yeah, there's quite a few of them in this area.
Yeah, this, I do like how nice and wide this road does get. They certainly understand how much commercial traffic drives along this stretch. And, even though this is a mountain pass, you're certainly getting your fair share of urban style truck traffic on this drive.
Out of curiosity, Dan, what was the heat wave temperature last year in Washington?
Well, the really big heat wave was, I think they hit like 115 in Seattle.
Oh, damn.
A couple of days, yeah.
Wow.
In Seattle and Portland, yeah.
We also got the highest temperature ever in British Columbia.
Yeah.
So it's like may have been like a Canadian record, but was
yeah,
like over 110.
I think I think that's right. Yeah, they set a provincial temperature record in British Columbia. They may have also done the same in Alberta with this heat wave. Yeah. But that was the week before I flew out to Portland, and when I was out there, it was only 95 degrees. So it
Yeah.
cooled off 20 degrees and it was still 95.
I remember somebody in Bremerton complaining about it, but my air conditioner was out at home at the time.
Yeah.
So I guess that was their issue too, is they don't have, a lot of people don't have air conditioners in Washington State.
Right.
It's like I feel you. It's like I've been living it for 2 weeks.
Yeah. I think that, well, I mean, that part of the country just isn't used to seeing heat waves like that, right?
So,
yeah.
Here we just entered King County, and also quite a bit on that last gantry was some weather instrumentation. You'll see probably see a lot of that. You want to get some feeling of the conditions and everything out.
Well, we're right in the epicenter of the pass at this point, and what's happening now is that the westbound lanes, which we're on, are on the north side of the valley, and the eastbound lanes are on the south end of the valley, separated by a large canyon. Probably the two roadways are about a mile apart at this point. And they'll stay that way for a little while until we get out the other side here. But this is really the central part of the Pass Highway.
Yeah.
So the middle of that is the source of the Snoqualmie River, the beginning of it here.
Yeah.
That sits between the two carriageways. You see here it's how much that drops, even below the highway here.
Yeah.
Yep, and as I mentioned earlier, you know, the old wagon road was 117 feet higher when crossing through the pass. So they did lower it from where it originally was. And now everyone, you understand why sometimes I tell my history when I can, because, sometimes I'm in the middle of talking and my dear toddler, hands me a bunch of her toys and a bunch of random things in dance contest.
She gave me a chicken nugget earlier. So
Well,
really good.
she doesn't want you to go hungry.
Exactly.
All right. It's like, thank you.
But yeah, it's just amazing to me going through here about how this pass, dates back to the original indigenous inhabitants, and just how, it's gone through so many iterations since then, and yet we're able to drive on it today.
Yeah. I wonder if that's true of a lot of the mountain passes. Because, American settlers and travelers always pick the path of least resistance when trying to figure out how to get across a mountain range. And in a lot of cases, they were just following what the native people had done, because they didn't know any better. So they just copied whatever the indigenous tribes were doing.
Yeah.
So I wonder how many of these prominent mountain passes, like this one, and then even further south, like the Donner Pass in California, they all have their roots in some sort of native transportation system.
Yeah, there's a ton of them down here, not just Donner. Like, I think the only one that was really truly new is Tioga.
Yeah.
Or Sherman Pass. There's an obscure one no one's probably ever heard of. Only non-state highway to cross the Sierras.
Oh, is that right?
Yep, Forest Service Road.
Okay.
Yes, sweetie, let's build blocks. Let's build a bridge.
But as you progress, though, is like these early wagon roads and these mountain ranges, usually they didn't have the best choice of grade. It was usually the railroad that did. So I kind of noticed that with like the Dutch Flat and Donner Lake Road. It was kind of put in a location that wouldn't interrupt the railroad grade. So usually it was in a less opportune spot, kind of higher up, more treacherous terrain than the railroad would have utilized.
We're building with blocks over here. Aren't you disappointed you're missing this, Tom?
I actually had a really awesome Lego city when I was growing up. It was something like 200,000 Legos, so yeah, I would love to play with blocks.
Yeah, that. I didn't quite have 200,000 of them, but I was definitely into that stuff too over the years.
Yeah, I had to, when my mom moved out of Lansing, I had to destroy it like when I was 25 years old. That was just a blast.
Something we don't have too much of in the East, Forest Service roads.
No.
Yeah, that's...
Especially, well, Maryland especially doesn't. There's a few, but
That's
probably not as common. Little, small trails and small dirt tracks and stuff.
Yeah. You don't even have that stuff in the Adirondacks, I don't think. I think that's mainly a Western thing.
A lot of them started out as fire break roads out here.
Yeah, those too.
The tower? Yeah.
I like how she's intently holding that piece of bread like she's going to do something with it.
I love how... Oh, there it goes! I love how at one point I put a block on crooked and she straightened it. She's pretty smart.
Oh, let's
Before
see
you know it, she'll be
here.
learning how to build bridges.
Got about a half hour left in this video. If anybody watching in the live chat has any questions they'd like to ask our expert panel and our expert toddler here, if you haven't already, make sure you send them in. We'll do the best we can to answer them for you. But I would say that we've passed through the most scenic stretch of the pass at this point, right?
Yeah, it was going to become pretty urbanized here pretty quick.
Yeah. So we're through the western side of the pass. We still got some mountain views here for the next about 20 miles or so, but the most scenic part of the drive has come and gone. Let's see, what exit number is this going to be?
42.
42, all right. Which means we're 42 miles from downtown Seattle. Let's see here. You want to start talking about Seattle at this point, Tom, or do you want to wait a little bit?
What do you want to talk about?
Well, Laura's got a book full of notes here.
Laura, why don't you start out with something? We'll chime in.
Well, I'll speak for her because she's building.
Yeah, I just caught me. Yeah, probably otherwise occupied. What has she got in her notes?
Yeah. Let's see here. What can I say here? Yeah, we talked about all this stuff already, I think. Yeah. Seattle has a really interesting history when it comes to the planning of its freeways and the freeway revolts that happened in the 60s and the subsequent changes that were made to its freeway system to enable the parts of it that survive today to be built in the first place.
Yeah, so trying to figure out where to start because what I appreciate from an urban planning perspective. My background's in transportation planning, and no, we should not throw balls at Mr. Dan's beer. Is how Seattle is an example of a city that figured it out, right? So a lot of cities, pretty much a lot, the general trend was to just blast a highway through and, to unfortunately do it in in neighborhoods of poor and minority populations. And also, at the beginning of building the interstate highways, just a complete disregard for the environment. And Seattle kind of figured out a way to, I guess, figured out a way to compromise. To compromise getting a highway through, but also trying new innovative ways, such as with tunnels and covered sections, to try and preserve the neighborhood fabric while also getting traffic into and out of the city. So really the last 7 miles of I-90 took about 30 years to build. The first I-90 plan in 1963, and the source that I found, one of the sources I found when I was reading through the history, literally used the subtitle, "First Plan Inspires Horror."
Oh boy.
And some of the quotes included, "It's going to bury Mercer Island under pillars of concrete. A white highway through black neighborhoods in Seattle's central area." And something that, sticks out to me, right, is so I'm from the Baltimore area. And part of why Baltimore is a case study in highway revolts and in the success of canceling highways is because you had a mix of, going through poor African American neighborhoods, but also going through rich upper class white areas. And Seattle had that as well. And like the Baltimore area, figured out a way to connect these communities of people together. The people who were affected along with the people who had power, basically to stop highways from being built. But in Seattle's case, some of the highways in Seattle got canceled, and we'll go into more detail about that when in the Seattle episode. But specifically with I-90, they were able to eventually come to a compromise to get it built. So, basically, the groups that sort of joined together to, and basically the group that got together to cancel the R.H. Thompson Expressway and the Empire Expressway, and ultimately influenced how I-90 was built, was University of Washington students and professors, neighborhood activists, the Black Panthers, and then, with I-90 you had Mercer Island, and, you had all these multiple governments as well. But, so basically in 1970, Mercer Island Mayor Davis persuaded the state highway director to put together a new team and redesign I-90. And this new team did something that hadn't really been done before, and created plans to do a narrow highway with lids and platforms surrounded by parklands with pedestrian and bike trails. In 1971, the state of Washington negotiated with the central area reps to build a 2,000-foot lid over the freeway west of Mount Baker Ridge, as well as build a new park and elementary school. So in the early 1970s, you had these very long court battles, that the freeway builders initially thought that, the state laws will just be a temporary, just to put a temporary delay on things. And, state judges rejected the claims of the I-90 proponents. But however, when they appealed on the federal level, the federal courts prohibited the state from purchasing property, except in hardship cases, from January of 1972 to August of 1979. So pretty much for the rest of the decade. So it's kind of amazing, right? So, the state DOT in 1972, the R.S. Thompson Highway was killed by voters. So you had highways successfully being canceled, but yet, the state was still pretty confident that, even this is just a temporary,
Clearly the vote was rigged.
It's, but we'll get this highway built, no problem. So they basically green-lighted, the project, right? And And then the federal courts prohibited the land acquisition, and then the voters killed the R.H. Thompson Highway. And then in 1973, basically the Federal Appeals Court sent the entire I-90 project back to square one by requiring a new environmental impact statement and more public hearings.
Yeah, because now we were in the era of environmental activism, and it wasn't just a community activism thing anymore. Yeah.
Correct. And so, by 1974, the Seattle City Council tilted against it being finished. So things were kind of in jeopardy. But then on December 22nd, 1976, Governor Davis, working with the University of Washington's Office of Environmental Remediation, got all 6 jurisdictions involved to sign an agreement. So that's Seattle, Mercer Island, Bellevue, King County, the Metro, and the state. So they managed to do this compromise. And again, this compromise involves building, the lids and platforms and, parks, multimodal, bike, pedestrian. And in 1977, the EIS, the Environmental Impact Statement, was ready for federal approval. And so it seems like at this point, okay, finally it's going to move forward. But then Mayor Charles Royer got elected and a campaign for the feds to delay the approval. Wait. Okay, yes, because in 1977 it was ready for approval. And then Mayor Royer got elected. He campaigned for it to be delayed. His idea was to use the funds to improve the existing road and bridge, add transit, spread the remainder money across the Puget Sound. And most of the Seattle state reps agreed, but basically nobody else in the state did, in the state legislature. So Federal Transportation Secretary Adams ended up signing the EIS. And then in 1979, the injunction on the land purchasing lifted. But then, 1980, in April, President Carter clamped controls on federal public works funding to fight inflation. So, oh no, will it get built? And so then in October, another, group was formed, the Committee for Balanced Regional Transportation. And their mission was to break loose money in the Highway Trust Fund. And so then Reagan gets elected.
By the way, I'd like to say that Jimmy Carter wasn't just holding up freeways in Atlanta, as you can see here.
Yeah. Right. So basically, President Jimmy Carter holding up the freeways, and then Ronald Reagan gets elected, and, he's a fiscal conservative, so, oh no, what's going to happen now? However, the Committee for Balanced Regional Transportation, the members ended up convincing him that those last 7 miles were vital. And so they took a risk to start I-90 in the promise that the money would come. So basically, conveniently, the new Secretary of Transportation, Secretary Berenson, was from Washington State and believed in the project. So they basically did everything that they could to look for every possible source of funds to make it happen. And in 1984, Brian Hinkle became the project manager of what was dubbed the New Environmentally Friendly Freeway. And then once workers started digging, it seemed like the controversy vanished. And you had the Mount Baker Tunnel, you have a new bridge over Lake Washington being built, the westbound and center lanes, are operational by 1989, everything seems to be going well, and then, oh no. November 1990, the Lacey Murrow Bridge, so the original bridge over Lake Washington, a section of it broke apart during a storm during the renovation, so they had to basically rebuild the bridge, which took an extra 14 months.
It's one of the only examples of a bridge sinking.
Yeah.
Because the bridges over Lake Washington are floating bridges because of how deep Lake Washington is. It's several hundred feet. So it's not practical to build fixed bridge piers in the lake, out from shore. So they built these floating bridges, which are these large, buoyant, not really pontoons, but they're like these giant, like, floating immersed tubes that float on the lake surface, and they're chained to the lake bed. and the pressure inside of the chambers, of the air chambers in the pontoon sections helps regulate the buoyancy of each individual section. Well, it turns out that the contractors screwed up their calculations on the buoyancy, and then when a very stiff wind hit the bridge on one particular day, it just broke loose, and sections of the bridge broke apart and sank to the lake bed. By the way, that contractor was subsequently banned from doing business in the state of Washington for 25 years after that fiasco.
Wow!
And I'm not done. That contractor had a role to play in several significant cable-stayed bridge projects around the United States in the 1990s all the way through the 2000s, none of which, of course, were in the state of Washington. One of them actually was in the state of New York not too long ago.
Wow.
Just throwing that out there.
Did you happen to work with or for said?
I don't think any of the people I worked with were veterans of that project, no. I should hope not, anyway.
But yeah, so 1993 they finally completed their mess up.
So the bridge was complete by 93? Okay.
Yeah, and then there were some minor projects that were continued into 1994. So you had, a transit carpool ramp from 405 to westbound 90, southbound 405 to westbound 90, restriping of the carpool lanes. They installed a median barrier in the carpool lanes, and then another exit ramp from eastbound 90 to Rainier Avenue South. And then the landscaping continued into 1995, and then that's when it was finished.
So one of the premier urban freeways in America is barely 25 years old.
Yeah.
It was built entirely in the 80s and early 90s and survived a bridge sinking along the way.
We were alive for said bridge sinking.
I was too. Yeah.
That tells you how young it is.
And it also tells you how long it took to get that built.
Yeah.
If they were starting to talk about it, with the creation of the interstate system, and here we are in the 90s, and they're still trying to finish it up. That is a very long pregnancy period for that section of I-90.
Woo!
All that work for 7 miles.
Having been pregnant, good Lord.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that she popped out right on time too.
Yes, only 5 days late.
Yeah. But yeah, there are other examples of late stage interstates in other American cities. Like Philadelphia has a couple of them, with I-676, the Vine Street Expressway, being completed in the early 90s. The Blue Route, I-476, around the west side of Philly, was completed in the early 90s as well. So there are other examples of these projects just getting drawn out over the course of 30 or 40 years. But they are rare, and usually, in most cases, projects that are drawn out for that long a time just never see the light of day. But I-90 is an exception to that ended up seeing the light of day, with a lot of modifications made to the design over the years, of course.
But you guys mentioned the floating bridges. It's kind of a signature in general.
I'm
not really sure what's going on right now.
Rainy wants to give me lots of kisses. That's what's going on.
Yeah, no kisses for you, Tom.
I need to get one of the dogs out for that.
Is this what you're singing at Carnegie Hall in April?
That is my solo debut, right?
All right, very cool. Exit 20. We have 20 miles to go. Yeah, did we even pass anything?
Oh God, yes, we did.
While you're too busy singing with what's her face over here and her friend the owl.
With Miss Mount Rainier.
Oh, yeah.
We exit 25 was State Route 18 West. The interchange with that and the Snoqualmie Parkway. Yeah. And what's important to note is that area is where I-605, the second bypass, the outer loop of Seattle, is proposed.
Yeah, that's something else that we'll dive deep into with the Seattle webinar, but I say to anybody who's looking to build an outer bypass of Seattle in this area, good luck.
Yeah.
Just with the engineering challenges required and then also the environmental obstacles that would no doubt come up. I mean, if this was China, they would have built it 20 years ago. But, you know, in America, we have standards for these things. So, speaking of China, have any of you watched any of the Olympics coverage?
No.
No, unfortunately. Have you? Mike has.
I got dropped it. I found the women's ice hockey and the U.S. beat Finland 5-2, and then there was some mixed doubles curling after that.
Ooh, I'll bet Doug's watching that.
Yeah.
We just saw Doug. We got a high and by. We got to see Doug, so that's good.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're just getting ready to.
Well, this is the part of the drive where it becomes much more urbanized. Now that we're officially out of the mountains and we've entered the Seattle metro area. Which, if I can pull this up here.
Yeah, that said, I still haven't really seen it hasn't looked really like suburbs. You still see, it's still a tree line as far as you can see. It's amazing being that close to a major city.
Yeah, right.
Still haven't seen a skyline yet. Here we are, 17 miles out.
Yeah, this is another one of those cities where you don't realize you're on top of a city of 750,000 people until you're right on top of it. Seattle.
Oh, there we go. We see some cranes there. There we go.
Yeah, well, they're building something.
Yeah.
Seattle is the largest city in the state of Washington and the Pacific Northwest region of North America. It's larger even than Vancouver, British Columbia. The 2020 census population was 737,000. The metro area population is about 4 million. Seattle is really like the moon colony of American metro areas because it's so far away from everything else. It's like a full day's drive to Portland. It's a full day's drive to like Salt Lake. You know, it's really the outer rim, to use a Star Wars term, of American metro areas. Now, at least in the contiguous 48 United States, now you might say that Honolulu is the ultimate outer rim colony for American cities, but at least in terms of the 48 states, that appears to be the case here. Seattle was founded in 1851 and has become one of the largest, or one of the more significant commercial and shipbuilding centers on the west coast of the U.S. And, of course, it is where the western terminus of Interstate 90 is, which is about 3,000 miles away from Boston, Massachusetts.
The interesting thing about downtown Seattle, Dan, is a lot of it got regraded early on in its history. It wasn't a mud flat.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so like a lot of the hills that you see down there were graded down, so it would kind of infill like around Pioneer Square and everything. So the actual street level, the original street level, is like 10 feet below you.
Oh, wow.
Isn't there a
That's where the
story of
whole-
like original doors of buildings being below street level now?
Yep. There's a whole underground area around there. There's actually a tour of it that you can do around Pioneer Square, where you get off at Coleman Dock from the ferry system.
Well, I'm going to add that to my to-do list next time I'm in Seattle.
Yes.
Yeah, it's worth it. It was really cool.
I didn't spend a lot of time in downtown Seattle when I was there. It was mainly just a freeway clinch-a-thon, but I do want to get back there at some point to finish out the I-5 coverage and also the West Seattle Bridge, which remains closed at this time. Hopefully it'll be reopened at some point in the next year.
I got
or so.
some pictures of that before that problem happened with that bridge too.
Yeah. You survived the West Seattle Bridge. They should make a T-shirt that says that.
Yeah. No, the thread I put on AA Roads ended up becoming the whole bridge closure thread, kind of inadvertently.
Oh boy. Yeah, well, I'm sure we'll have a lot to say about that in a couple of weeks with the Seattle webinar. I don't know what it is about this part of the U.S., but this part of Washington State has a tendency to be the epicenter of major bridge problems.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. And there's a lot of strange designs out there too. Like there's a lot of these float bridges, not just on Lake Washington, but they're like everywhere. You have the ferries, which have their own issues. There's a lot of strange oddities in highway networks that you're not going to see in other states.
Yeah. And I wonder how much of that is, again, due to its isolation, relatively speaking.
Yeah, like Puget Sound, that presents its own geographic challenges. Like I've often heard people say, "Oh, why don't they just throw a bridge across like Puget Sound?" Is like, how are you going to do that?
Well, you look at it on a map and you're like, "Oh, it shouldn't be that hard." But when you do a few site visits and you study the geologic history of the region, you realize why no one has built a bridge.
Right.
You know. Well, there are 3 Interstate 405s. There's one in California, there's one in Oregon, and there's one in Washington. The one in California, I'm sure, is infamous to many road enthusiasts alike. It's simply known as the 405 around Los Angeles. The 405 in Oregon is the western half of the downtown loop in Portland. And here we have what was intended as an eastern bypass of Seattle, but really becomes its own through north-south highways serving Bellevue and the east shore of Lake Washington. It's not so much of a bypass anymore, although I know that's what they developed it to be. But then Microsoft happened, and Bellevue exploded into a huge city in its own right, and now the 405 is clogged with traffic through this area also.
It's a main street of its own way.
Yeah.
Yes. So, fun fact, most songs out there are written about the 405 in Los Angeles, but the band Death Cab for Cutie, which is from the Seattle area, their song 405 is about this 405. And if you tune in to the Seattle episode, I will be singing that song.
That is one thing that we had to negotiate. She really wanted to sing it on this episode. But I thought, it might be a little more appropriate if we save it for the Seattle webinar when we do a little more of a discussion on 405. But
yes.
So that's the agreement that we reached for that.
Indeed.
I'd probably say out of the 3, my favorite is the one in Portland. That's got some really nice scenery of downtown.
Oh yeah. That might be my favorite of the 3. Yeah. It's the shortest of the 3, but I think it might be my favorite. So we're coming up on Mercer Island here. We're inside 10 miles to go.
Yep. And I don't want to cut you off. If you have.
I don't think we mentioned anything about the light rail conversion.
No, or the lanes.
Yeah, we need to discuss that for a couple minutes because that's a hot button topic that is controversial to say the least. And you can see it on the left here. They've the reversible roadway that was in the middle has been taken away and is now going to be a light rail dinky service between Seattle and Everett, or not
Yes.
Everett, Bellevue.
Yes, so the reversible lane, the express lanes, were there from 1992 to 2017, and now, oh gosh, lost my train of thought. So they were replaced by high occupancy vehicle lanes on the outer lanes of the floating bridge.
Yeah.
But
What's my doing?
There's a lot of discussion about just how much use this light rail system is going to get. You know, how worth the investment is it really? How wise is it to remove reliable express roadway lanes in favor of something like this? I'm not sure that anybody really knows the answer until it actually goes live in a couple of years, but that's what they've decided to do. You notice how we're crossing Mercer Island right now, and you notice how bucolic and rural everything looks. The landscaping, you see the overpasses here. This was all stuff that was not part of the original 1960s engineering plan for I-90. This all had to be engineered into the road in the 70s and 80s in order for it to pass the smell test for Mercer Island and Seattle as a whole.
correct. So you have two lids, the Mercer Island lid and the Luther Burbank Park lid. And the Mercer Island lid is closer to Seattle, and then the Luther Burbank Park lid is the one that's closer to the East Channel Bridge.
Yeah, I think this might be the Mercer Island lid, what we're passing under right now. Reminds me very much of a tunnel in the Big Dig in Boston. It certainly has that same feel to it. And when we get out of this tunnel on the other side, you'll get a really nice view of Lake Washington. And then we'll have the Lake Washington Bridge, which I know we've talked about. We teased it a little while ago, where we kind of went over the history of it.
We did, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Dan, did you ever get to the East Portal View?
Of the bridge? No, I didn't get pictures of that.
Yeah, that's a hard one to find. I just climbed from the lake all the way up to the top. I got turned around those neighborhoods, and some of them have like 30% inclines on them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's a pretty view though.
Yeah. But this isn't a bad view either. This is Lake Washington. You can see the skyline of downtown Seattle off on the right.
We're on the Homer M. Hadley Bridge. That's the westbound side. And then the Lacey v. Murrow is the eastbound.
Yep, they're both floating bridges. They're considered two different bridges in the catalog. And there are three bridges. There's the two here, and then there's one further north at Evergreen Point. But, I know. This is easily the busiest of the Lake Washington crossings. And then once you get on the other side of this bridge, you enter, what is that? The
Mount Baker Tunnel.
Yeah, the Mount Baker Tunnel. That's what it's called.
Which runs under Sam Smith Park and the Mount Baker Ridge neighborhood. And this tunnel is actually where, on the MLK Jr. Avenue corridor, is where the R.H. Thompson Expressway and the Empire Expressway would have been. So they would have been above us on the MLK Jr. corridor.
Yeah. So here's your second really long tunnel.
What do you mean?
Are you howling like a wolf?
Silent share
Ow!
up on the roof of the tunnel.
You could see the East Portal View when you were entering the tunnel there. There's that little kind of like overlook area that was sitting there.
Yeah, I'm going to have to, next time I'm in Seattle, I'm going to have to pinpoint where that is exactly. Yeah.
Hey, look how beautiful Seattle is.
Yeah, this is, as we come to the end of I-90. you have an interchange with I-5, and then right beyond that, you'll have the stadiums coming up. I do like the logos for the stadium that they have on the signs. That's pretty cool. You don't see that very often. Seattle is a beautiful city, especially this time of year in early July when this was filmed, because you might see the sun every once in a while.
Like you can today.
Like you could in this video, yeah. Little double-decker freeway action. The westbound lane's on the lower level, the eastbound on the upper level. All of this stuff is seismically engineered because, of course, we're in the midst of the Cascadia subduction zone in this area, but we'll talk more about that in a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what got the viaduct.
That's why the Alaskan Way is no longer with us. T-Mobile Park, the home of the Seattle Mariners, is dead ahead. And on the right, as we make the turn here, is Lumen Field, home of the Seattle Seahawks in the NFL and the Seattle Sounders of Major League Soccer. And my friends, after 140 miles, welcome to downtown Seattle, and welcome to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thank you all very much for watching. Be sure to give this video a like if you haven't already done so. I know you all like our toddler panelist here, helping us out along the way. But this was a good video to do. It was, again, one of my favorite drives in all of the Pacific Northwest from my travels last year. And I had a lot of fun doing it, and I knew I had to share it with you guys. Time for closing thoughts. Tom, why don't you start off?
Well, looking forward to doing the Seattle webinar. It's kind of bringing back a lot of memories for me, having to work up there and everything, what we're seeing right now at the end of this video. But yeah, it is nice to see I-90 again. I haven't seen it since it's been upgraded over the pass, so that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, and I know you've got a lot of stuff on the Alaskan Way that you want to get off your chest.
Yes.
The old pictures and whatnot. So yeah, we'll be sure to profile all that stuff and share that history. As for me, I mean, it was, as I said, it was one of the great drives of recent times for me. You know, just visiting Seattle and then doing this drive of I-90 was one of my favorites too. And it's good to revisit something that I enjoyed so much, and I'm looking forward to the Seattle webinar too. It's going to be a lot of fun to kind of profile not just the built freeway system, but also the freeways that never did see the light of day. I know that we teased a lot of that stuff over the course of this episode. What would you like to say?
I would just like to say that I'm just so thankful that you let all of us, come and be part of the episode. And I feel like I've learned so much about Interstate 90, and like I said, it, makes me nostalgic thinking about my grandparents. And so I'm really looking forward to the Seattle episode in a few weeks. And also, I'm now itching to get out there myself. Not that I wasn't always itching, but definitely being a part of this virtual tour makes me just really want to see all of this in person.
Absolutely. It's definitely worth it.
Yeah. Mike, any words?
Yeah, I'll be looking for this too, just to get an ideas, and it's part of the country I've never been to, but definitely seeing one of the most beautiful parts of the country.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
So, and yes, like unique challenges to the infrastructure and construction and all that, and how that.
Oh yeah, that's definitely true.
Every place is unique. They got floating bridges, like Norfolk has bridge tunnels.
Yeah.
So you got kind of like have what you're used to and what works, and each area has.
Yeah.
We have the interstate system, and each area has its own way of accomplishing it.
That's
Unique-
true.
Unique challenges.
Yeah, and I think you'll find in the Seattle episode that Seattle came up with their own unique ways to, engineer some of the challenges that they faced. And this was even before they knew they were in severe earthquake country in the 60s. So, we all know that they've done a lot of work since then. But I think we're going to close up shop here for this week and this episode. And thank you all very much for watching, listening, all that stuff. And we look forward to seeing you again next time on Roadway Whiz Live. We'll be back next Saturday with a show on Kansas City. Hope you all enjoy that one, and we hope to see you then. Until then, enjoy the rest of your weekend, enjoy your week ahead, and we'll talk to you next time.
Kansas City. Is that the